Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 103, is Get the Most from Your Machine. But before we get to that, two quick things. I'd like to thank Nancy Cook for her lovely handwritten note. Don't get too many of those anymore, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. In addition, if you have a topic you'd like to see covered in an upcoming video, please drop it in the comments below. Now, let's get to my opinion. Here is the striped table runners that I have made before that you've seen. And I wanted to show you first the difference in length. This is using 1.5 yards of fabric. This one is using 1.75 yards of fabric. So I just wanted you to visually see the difference there. It looks like it's about 9 inches longer with the extra, well, 1/4 yard's 9 inches, so duh, it's 9 inches longer. The other thing I wanted to talk about on this topic is I finally figured it out. I want to, when I buy 1.5 yards or 1.75 yards of fabric, I'm going to make 3 of the striped table runners. And why? Because of the little candle mats that I make from the leftover triangles. You get 4 triangles left over from each table runner. It takes 6 to make the candle mat. So if you make 3 table runners, you get 2 candle mats. In addition, you have enough for backing from this fabric and this fabric. This one, it's not wide enough. It's a little too narrow. The next one that I'm working on is Easter one, which didn't get done in time for this Easter, but next Easter. And I think I have enough of something else that I can piece down the center of what is in this section. But it's, to me, a really good use of fabric if you can make 2 of the candle mats and get backings out of 2 out of the 3 of the pieces of fabric. It really, I think, works great to cut down on your waste. So that's my opinion. Let's get to today's episode. Getting the most out of your machine. This includes keeping it running properly and not having to take it into the repairman or woman, repair people, when you don't need to. So let's start with the top. Use your manual. Know where your manual is. Know when your machine needs to be oiled. Know where the oil goes. Use your manual for troubleshooting. First go to if you have a problem. Next, we see this all the time with repairs. People say my machine isn't sewing properly. And you can see right away by looking at the sample stitches, it's clearly a threading issue. When there's bird's nests underneath, it's usually a threading issue. So make sure you're threading correctly. Now, you longer time sewers know this already, but especially for you new sewers, you have to have your presser foot up to thread your machine. Why? Because the tension discs are open when your foot is up. When your foot is down, it's closed. You can't get your machine threaded properly if the presser foot is down. So make sure the presser foot is up and the needle is up as you thread. That will help. When you have an issue, that's probably the first thing you go to. Rethread your machine and rethread your bobbin if necessary also. And going on to the bobbin, make sure you're using the correct bobbin. I can't tell you how many times people bring machines in for repair and the issue is they're using the wrong bobbin. So a lot of manuals don't say the name of the bobbin, but know which bobbin came with your machine originally and make sure if you buy more, you're buying the same bobbin. Really important to have a proper bobbin. They don't go from machine to machine. Next issue, and this really isn't repair focused, this is getting your work done to the best your machine will do. And what you want to make sure you're doing, use the correct needle. If you have some skipped stitches or something, you probably have too small of a needle and need to go to a larger needle size. Now, when we're piecing, we generally use an 80-12 needle. And I like the sharps. I don't have much use for universal needles because if you're sewing on a knit, then you would use a ballpoint needle. So some people like universal needles, and if you want to use them, clearly that's your choice. I like sharps for my piecing of quilts and things, and ballpoints if I'm sewing on knits. But proper needle type and proper needle size. If you're sewing on jeans, you're going to need a bigger needle. So remember that if you're having problems. That's something to pay attention to. And change your needle often enough. I heard somebody say they only change their needle once every 6 months. I wouldn't do that. Some people change it after every project. I change it frequently is how I would say it. Use the correct presser foot. If you're sewing and doing quilting, you probably want a 1/4 inch foot, and know where you have to place your fabric in regards to your 1/4 inch foot to get the proper seam allowance. We have several feet that I like. There's an open toe foot where I can see real well what's going on. We have ones that have a guide so that you can sew the exact same distance from the edge of your project. If you have any questions about what's the proper foot, you can talk to your dealer where you got your sewing machine from. Check YouTube videos. There's lots of information out there and to try to find the right foot for the right job. There's feet that you use for leather. There's feet for vinyl. There's needles for vinyl, as a matter of fact. But just think about the correct needle, the correct presser foot, and of course the correct needle plate. There's zigzag plates and single hole plates. So depending on what you're doing, I use the single hole plate almost all the time for my quilt piecing. And then of course if you want to do any kind of a decorative stitch, you need the wider needle plate. So use the correct equipment is really the bottom line for here. The last thing I want to talk about is guiding your fabric versus pushing and pulling. If you are pushing and pulling your fabric, there's something not working correctly for what you're doing. Perhaps you need to put on a walking foot. Or the other thing I see is you need to support the weight of your project you're working on. Gravity will work against you. So you want to be able to let the feed dogs do their work. You want the feed dogs to advance the fabric. Then your stitches will be nice and even. If you're pushing and pulling, you'll get some tiny stitches, you'll get some longer stitches, and things just won't look the way you want them to look. So remember that. Set your work area up so that it functions for you. When we have something really large in the store that we're trying to, say, for example, put binding on, we'll set up an ironing board the same height as our table to the left of the table, which helps support the weight of the project. So just remember, get yourself set up properly and you'll have an easier time. And the last thing I want to say is, in life, you really only need to know how to do two things. One is Google, and the other is turn it on and off. When all else fails, Google your problem. You will find all kinds of answers out there that you can try, and especially with computers, which a sewing machine they now call a sewing computer instead of a sewing machine, things aren't working right, turn it on, and turn it off, then turn it back on. That might solve your problem. So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, happy sewing.